Nations may rise, and empires may fall, but humanity pushes ever onwards. They till the land, they sail the seas, they cultivate art, and they hone weapons of war. They are driven to make their mark on the world and become a people remembered for ages to come. Humankind is a turn-based 4X strategy game. Like other similar games in the genre, your goal is to establish a nation and then lead your people from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age to the Iron Age and beyond, eventually with the hope of becoming the most powerful empire on the planet. Whenever you start a new campaign, you'll make some basic selections about the size of the map and the number of opponents that you want to face, and then, once that's done, you'll be given a random starting location on the world map. This first phase of the game, the Neolithic era, has you exploring around a hex-based environment, collecting food, and trying to find a good location for your starting city. And once you've done that and established your first permanent residence, the game really begins. Each of your cities produces resources which you need to grow your society. Food will allow you to increase your population. Industry allows you to produce buildings and units. Money can be used to buy production or bribe foreign neighbors. Research points can be accumulated to complete nodes on your technology tree, which will unlock new units and structures. Finally, there's influence, which is your political capital, needed to unlock passive benefits on the culture tree, as well as construct new outposts and then transform those outposts into full-fledged cities of their own. As you explore and expand, you'll encounter new territories and new resources, but each city can only benefit from resources inside its own territory. To make up for this, your major cities can annex other areas and add them to their total zone of control, provided that you've constructed an outpost in that area first. This allows you to increase the total amount of map that you control, as well as add resources to larger capital cities. It also gives you more space to construct districts as well. These districts are specialized areas such as farms or manufacturing plants or trading posts that allow you to increase the resources gained by your cities. However, each district requires space on the map, and each territory only has so many hexes available. As your community grows, you'll eventually come into contact with your foreign neighbors. While you can use diplomacy to play the part of the peacemaker, chances are good you'll eventually come into conflict with somebody. If you're worried about warfare, you can use your cities to produce military units that can be stacked together to create armies. Armies can then be sent to attack enemy units and fortifications, and every successful battle reduces your opponent's morale and their desire to continue the war. Once your opponent's morale is exhausted, they'll capitulate, but be warned, the same rules apply to you. If you're defeated in battle and lose all of your war support, foreign nations can force you to surrender. But ending a war, even on the losing side, isn't typically the end of the game, and you'll be able to continue playing with the hopes of improving your nation. Adding new cities and territories to your borders, researching technologies which will unlock new units and resources, adding new cultural policies and perhaps even unique buildings to your empire, all in the hopes of having the most fabulous federation at the end of the game. Now, before I move on, I'd like to note that Humankind has a number of features that set it apart from other 4X games in the genre. First, there's the combat. In most strategy games, when two units fight, the battle takes place either directly on the world map or on a separate map that's loaded in afterwards. Humankind uses a hybrid system that was developed in one of the studio's previous games, where whenever a battle breaks out, a section of the world map is cordoned off, at which point the involved armies will use that area as their fighting space. The game also includes a number of catch-up systems as well. Large empires, for instance, need more influence to expand their territory than smaller empires. Another example, if you are a neighbor to a technologically advanced empire, you can get passive bonuses to your research merely by being in close proximity to their borders. The best example, though, is the war support system that I mentioned earlier, where most conflicts between nations don't result in the elimination of either. Instead, somebody is eventually forced to surrender and give the winner either money or territory. But probably the most notable feature in Humankind is the way the game structures the eras you play through. In similar games, you'll reach new eras either at certain times or after researching specific technologies. But in Humankind, technology is only part of your progress. How it works is, after you found your first city, you will select from a list of historical nations that will serve as the foundation of your empire. Each nation gives different bonuses, whether it be agriculture, industry, or military. Once you've picked one, you'll proceed into the Ancient Era, at which point you'll start accumulating victory stars. These stars have two purposes. First, they're worth points, and the player with the most at the end of the game will win a points victory if no others have been achieved. But secondly, and more importantly, they're a measure of your progress. Stars can be accumulated by defeating enemy units, claiming territories, acquiring money, acquiring influence, building districts, growing your population, and researching new technologies. Accumulating 7 of these stars allows your society to literally level up, at which point you are allowed to proceed to the new era and select a new nation to serve as your archetype. And if you want, you can pick a culture that's completely different from your previous one, altering the bonuses that you get and potentially redefining your strategy. And keep in mind, you do this every time you reach a new era, which means that you are literally building your own civil society each time the game progresses. So what's the good and bad of Humankind? Well, for starters, I do like the presentation. All of the maps are beautifully rendered, and I think that the units and cities have a lot of nice detail. The user interface is also very functional, with a lot of easily accessible information, pop-ups, and filters. On a more mechanical level, I much prefer this style of city building. I like it in other contemporary games, and I like it here as well. The ability to build districts means that you don't want to just drop cities wherever you can. You want to make sure that they have good access to resources, and so there's some strategic planning in when and where you're going to build new outposts. On another mechanical note, I really like the combat system as well. Having your battles take place on a segmented off section of the world map adds an extra layer of tactical planning. The exact same mountains and rivers, which might serve as obstacles during your town construction, can also serve as obstacles during tactical combat as well.
Attack!
But the most notable feature has to be the progression system, which is honestly fantastic. For starters, beginning the game in the Neolithic era was an inspired choice. Being able to wander around as cavemen and kind of explore the area and see what kind of terrain and features you're dealing with before you're forced to put down your first major city is very convenient. And then, once you actually do start building your empire, being able to select your nation when you move to a new era is incredibly useful. The opportunity to choose between a variety of factions, each with a different bonus and strategic advantage gives you an unparalleled flexibility. You're not stuck with just one nation over the course of your campaign, and the game encourages you to change your nation as the need arises. But it's not all that it could be in terms of your civic pride. For as good as the core mechanics are, and I really like the city building, the combat, the progression system, the game also includes a number of secondary systems that are occasionally confusing and sometimes superfluous. A good example here is politics. As with most 4X games, diplomacy is a major part of your interaction with other players and NPCs. And yet, your options here are very limited. You only have two tools at your disposal, treaties and demands. Now, treaties are fairly straightforward, allowing you to open trade routes, to share map information, to declare war or to declare peace, so on and so forth. Demands, on the other hand, are a little more forceful. You can demand that an opponent not settle territories next to your border, or demand that they remove troops that have trespassed into your own territories. But what makes it weird is that this system is entirely reactive. You cannot preemptively make demands of your opponents. You have to wait until they commit a transgression, and then you get to make a demand. And not only that, but if the other side refuses, it pushes both nations towards open war. And the result is a bizarrely reactionary system, where your opponents can start making demands that they have no chance of backing up, while at the same time, the game is prompting you to make demands for stuff you might not even care about. You can even use this system to bully someone into making an alliance with you, which is one of the most unorthodox ways of making friends, I have to say.
You are aware that I am not known for my patience.
Fine. We'll do as you ask.
Some of us are born to rule. The others are like you.
A better example of an incomplete system would be religion. Early on in the game, you are allowed to build a temple, which will start accumulating religion points for your nation. This temple will slowly convert people to your faith, and once you've accumulated enough followers, you will be able to found a religion which will give you passive bonuses across your empire. As your population grows and your followers increase, your religion can eventually level up and gain additional bonuses. But here's the thing, the max level of your religion caps out at 4. And once you reach that maximum, your religion's utility sharply declines. You can keep converting new people to the faith, but you're not getting any additional bonuses for doing so. And in most games I played, this was achievable in the medieval or early modern era, which is only about halfway through the campaign. But probably the best example of a borderline unnecessary system is pollution. This is a feature where once you reach the industrial era, you'll have the option to start constructing heavy industry and power production buildings that create pollution as a byproduct. This pollution can then slowly build up over time, reducing the quality and production levels of your cities, and eventually, if it gets too high, prematurely ending the game as the planet has been rendered uninhabitable for human life. Now, conceptually, there's supposed to be a measure of risk-reward here, as buildings that produce pollution are more effective than ones that do not, with the idea being that you make the choice to build a power plant or train station so that you can get short-term bonuses, knowing that in the long run, the entire planet will suffer. Which, unfortunately, never winds up being as much of a quandary as the developers probably wanted it to be. With the problem being that the computer has no problem using these pollution buildings, which leads you to one of two scenarios. If you are behind in points, then you have to use pollution buildings, because it's the only way that you're going to be able to catch up and maybe win. At the same time, if you're already the points leader, there's still no reason not to use pollution buildings. Not only will it be easier to maintain your lead, but ending the game early isn't much of a threat if you're already ahead in terms of score. In the end, I find myself somewhat divided on Humankind, because I really like the core gameplay. The combat and city building are a lot of fun, and I think that the progression system, the ability to choose a different nation each time you progress to a new era, is incredibly creative and very useful in a 4X game. But, as I've mentioned, there are also a number of subsystems that never deliver the same level of utility. And here's the irony, is that for a lot of players, it might not even matter. In most of the campaigns that I played, the game ended well before the religion or diplomacy system started to really break down. And I've never even seen the worst effects that pollution has to offer. It's only when I started playing the game on the largest maps with the longest time frame that I started noticing how some of the subsystems didn't quite fit into my strategy. And that's a shame, because there are a lot of players that play 4X games for exactly that type of experience. Ultimately, I would give Humankind 3 out of 4 stars, and a unusually conditional recommendation. If you are a fan of strategy games, if you are a fan of turn-based games, and even if you are a casual fan of 4X games, this is a great choice. The core of the game is solid, and the progression system gives it a very unique pacing compared to other similar civility-oriented titles. At the same time, if you're a steel-toed fan of 4X games, if you're someone who wants the long war, who wants to play on the biggest map with the most computer opponents, this one might be a disappointment. Because in a short game, everything's fine, but it's when you start playing a long campaign that those cracks become a lot more noticeable. Alright, well, thanks once again for being such patient and civilized listeners. I'm gonna go put on my civvies and take a civilian vacation. Till next time.
Congratulations. Under your guidance, the thrilling tale of Humankind has been rewritten in your own words. There may be future adventures and deeds, an even grander scope for this grand story. Regardless, you have left a great mark and answered the question: how far will you push Humankind?